All right, let's talk Nebraska Cornhuskers. Listen, going into a massive opportunity, of course, going out west to UCLA, they get it done, showcasing a gutsy performance. Obviously, no Dylan Raiola. There was a lot of questions going into this game. What was the direction of this Cornhuskers program? Was Matt Rule the right guy to lead him through some adversity? And I think we got a lot of great results and a lot of questions answered. We'll get to all the specifics and what it means for Nebraska going forward. But first, I'm Nick, that is Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, the Cornhuskers came into this game against the UCLA Bruins. Look, they were the favorite. I think a lot of people, kind of felt Nebraska was the better team, but they were dealing with adversity. Raiola's out. The season was sort of hanging in the balance for the Huskers. Were they, obviously now with 3 losses going into this weekend, were they going to keep collapsing? Was this a team still trending in the upward direction, or were they going to fall apart under the pressure? And the reality is they stepped up. It was a really good performance, I think, across the board. 28-21 final, obviously, UCLA with that last score to make it, look a little closer than I think the game really felt. And going on the road and getting a conference win against a Bruins team that, let's be honest, has been feisty. They've been playing a lot of really good football. Obviously, they changed their coach, and they've been really simplifying things, playing really aggressive, doing a lot of really nice stuff, certainly offensively. And that's where I want to start today with the defensive side of football for Nebraska. Let's go ahead and pull up this team stats right here, if you don't mind, Mize. And one of the things that's very interesting, and of course, obviously the late touchdown, I believe the 94-yard drive, added a lot of yardage, added a lot of first downs to the UCLA ledger. You can say they ended the game with 21 first downs to Nebraska's 20, 348 total yards to Nebraska's 361, 191 passing to Nebraska's 205. But despite, that garbage time yardage, even though the game was still technically up for the decision at that point, it felt like Nebraska was clearly going to win, in my opinion, although it came down to the very end to eventually finish it out. But the reality is, this was a defensive group that came into this game that had some questions that had to be answered. Like, was this a group that was good enough to handle, go on the road to handle a frisky offense? Now, look, rushing wasn't good. Was still a flaw, still a big flaw. They surrendered 157 yards on the ground. So again, it's not exactly where you want to be from a rushing defense at all, but they stepped up and did enough. And when you have your starting quarterback out, it takes a team effort, right? It's going to be one of those things where defensively, you're going to be put in tougher situations. You're going to have to change the way you play a little bit. Offensively, you're going to have some other guys step up. We'll get to Johnson, of course, in a second with a massive game, big-time game for Nebraska. But I was pleased with the defense, right? Wasn't perfect. A lot of things to clean up, as there always is. But the reality is, Nebraska coming down the stretch here, we're going to see how feisty they are. With Dylan Raiola, they were a team with potential. They were a team with talent. Could Raiola live up to his billing? Could they continue to grow and develop with him as an offense with Raiola behind center? Now we're going to see how feisty they are. And so far, again, one game against UCLA, not a great opponent by any means, but still a team that's been playing good football. The Huskers, under Matt Rule's leadership, showed they had some feistiness to them, showed they had some guts to them, and I, for one, was very pleased to see it. But let's go and transition to the offensive side of the football right now. Miles, let's go and pull up the box score when it comes to passing, rushing, receiving, and look at the individual performances, if you don't mind. All right, so we'll start with the backup quarterback. Obviously, 13 of 15, kept it relatively simple, not a lot of attempts, of course. Listen, the numbers look great, and I think overall, I think we can all agree that he came in and did an admirable job. Give credit to the offensive strategy and the game plan. They basically came into the game, treating him like a backup quarterback and making sure he was set up for success, which I think was obviously a smart move. I can't tell you the number of times we see, and Nebraska fans, you guys, of course, have probably seen it as well, where teams, listen, the starter goes down, the backup goes in, and especially if the starter had a certain set of skills, physical gifts or anything like that, and the offense doesn't change their game plan. They're like, listen, this is who we are as an offense. This is who we are. I'm like, listen, if your quarterback changes, you got to change your approach. You got to change your strategy. And Nebraska, to their credit, did. So A+ effort on the offensive coaching staff there for getting that done. But obviously the hero of the day, of course, is Johnson, Emmett Johnson. 129 yards on the ground, as you can see right there. 100 yards, of course, through the air. The big plays. 3 total touchdowns, 1 rushing, 2 receiving. Clearly the MVP of this game, undeniably so. Stepping up in a big way. I'm not saying he's had a disappointing season, but I think this is what we've been waiting for with Johnson. A game where he takes over and showcases a lot of what Nebraska fans had been hoping to see based on some preseason hype. And boy, oh boy, did he dominate. Obviously, rushing, receiving, across the board, offensive playmaker extreme. And now the beautiful thing about this kind of performance is I think it's translatable. I think it's something now, can you expect 100 yards rushing, receiving every single game going forward? No. But the reality is finding different playmakers, getting the running back receiving game involved. They still have some guys at receiver they want to integrate more and things like that and figure out some things, of course, with TJ now behind center. But the reality is what they showed against UCLA, good defense, team defense, running the football, right? Getting some big plays from some of their stars, namely Johnson, of course. I think a lot of that was just good team football and good leadership and good coaching. And that is something that you can sustain, not just the rest of 2025, by the way, but in multiple years going forward. That's been, I think, the biggest issue, I think, for Nebraska the past 20, 25 years is they've had games, they've had weeks, they've had, frankly, every once in a while, a season or so where it's like, okay, they're on the right track. They're heading in a right direction for sure, but they just can't sustain it. And the reality is, if you look back at some of those good games, good seasons, good performances, it was sort of one-off. So it was, it required a superstar. It required an Ndamukong Suh or something like that, right? Just a guy to take over a game or, whatever it may be. But what we saw, even though Emmett Johnson took over this game, I think the style that Nebraska played and this convincing road victory is something that they can replicate going forward. And that's been the key for me this season. One of the problems I have with Nebraska, even with some of their wins, whether it's the come from behind victory against Maryland or any of their other victories, things like that. Where there's a gutsy early win against Cincinnati, by the way, just all these different ways, and they were finding different ways to win, which was great, but it didn't feel sustainable, right? They needed special teams touchdowns. They needed the defense to dominate one week. They needed Raiola to turn it on in the fourth quarter the next week. It just felt like they were trying to figure out, okay, what kind of team are we? And I think at this game against UCLA, they figured it out. They're a team defense that has some struggles against the run, but they make some big plays when needed. And they're an offense that, again, plays as a team, wants to run the football, but will use playmakers to create big plays when the opportunities are there in the confines of the strategy. And when Raiola returns, of course, we're looking to the future now, then he adds a playmaking element on top of all of that. And I think that's what Nebraska has shown themselves to be. And again, I think that's sustainable, and I think that's why this win in particular, even though it may not be a marquee victory, was critical for Nebraska. All right, Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. But first, Huskers fans, in the comment section below, obviously Emmett was, clearly, the MVP of the game. But outside of Johnson, give us who you think had the best performance for the Huskers on Saturday. Could go a bunch of different directions here, but you can only pick one. Give us your Nebraska Cornhuskers MVP over UCLA. Put them in the comment section below. But Miles, over to you now. Give us your thoughts on everything Nebraska.
Yeah, Nick, when I look at this performance, I think this spells out, we look at the end of the season for Nebraska as far as the games they got left. They're not going to be easy. There's some tough opponents, some feisty opponents that give good teams really tough time. But when you see a performance like this, especially, of course, with Raiola being out for the rest of the season, you look at Latif and what he was able to do, and it's like you said, they tailored the offense around him, made it easier, made it so that he can do what he needs to do and highlight the certain players they need to highlight. But they're able to get the job done. And when you look at this team, I expect, you saw, okay, we got a huge performance out of Emmett Johnson. We're receiving, he hasn't had more than like 30-something yards all season receiving, and he has over 100 today. So someone like that takes over the game, and you're like, wow, despite, shoddy quarterback performance, maybe a little bit shaky, they get the job done. Well, the quarterback position wasn't the weak part here. I think they have something in TJ Latif of maybe a future passer there. I don't know. The distance between him and Raiola is pretty small, but Latif seems like a good player that could come in and, finish out this season strong, take you to a bowl game and do some good stuff for Nebraska. So the fact that they could potentially go, 9-3 at the end of the season, it's very real. I think Latif can lead this team to be who they want to be. And I think this is a Nebraska team that put on a gutsy performance. We've seen them have close ones before this season so far. We saw some of the losses, like the loss against USC, very close loss. The loss against Michigan, very close loss. We were wondering, hey, at the beginning of the season, we said, hey, they got the close loss thing behind them. You think now, okay, is it creeping back up? Now you kind of see a really close game, like you said, maybe a little bit closer on paper than it actually was, but against UCLA, were they going to let it up? Could they continue their path? And I think they can, especially even when the quarterback goes down. It makes me really feel good because it's a team thing now, the team mentality. They're over the close loss thing is no longer something that's going to haunt them, but it's not just because of great quarterback play. It's a team mentality, and they're able to get the job done. So I love the performance by Nebraska. I think the most important thing for me is when I'm looking at them and what they have poised for the rest of this season, I don't feel worried that Raul is out. Yes, you would love for him to be in. Yes, he's a fantastic quarterback and he's going to do some really good stuff. But nonetheless, this is a team that I think can win out with the current structure of the team that they have. And I think they can go to whatever bowl game. Then it's going to be a pretty decent bowl game if they're 9-3, whatever bowl game they need to go to, and be able to win that one as well.
Yeah, one final point to end on. You brought up the close score thing. I think I want to highlight that because that was obviously a focus. And at this point, Nebraska, I think by my counts, 4-2 this season in one-score games. Last year, 2-5. Right. So again, we're seeing the trend definitely in Nebraska's favor in terms of handling business in those close games, which if you're going to be a contender, they're going to be a lot of close games. That's just the way it is in big boy college football, Big Ten, SEC, right? Two power conferences, of course. You're going to have to find a way to win those dogfights. And listen, they had two disappointing defeats, Michigan and USC. We get it. But the reality is they're trending in the right direction in terms of finishing these games. I mean, remember, as much as I felt like it was a dominating performance from Nebraska, 4 minutes to go or so, it was a one-score game. What does Nebraska do? Finish it out. Again, finding a way to win the close games. They were up 28-7, I think, in the third quarter, total control. Clearly the better team, but UCLA at home, they're feisty, find a way to make it close. Nebraska, close game jinx. No, sir, they handle business. They finish the job. So we're seeing the trend certainly in good directions for the Huskers. Obviously, two tough games, Penn State, Iowa. But I like your chances, ironically, in both those games. I think both are good teams. Both have flaws. We'll see how Nebraska does. But I think this was a good win for the Huskers in a sustainable way, right? This is it's a team effort, a team win, not relying on Raiola magic. And even their running game, I think their long run of the game was like 14 yards. So even if you sit there and say, well, Johnson had the big plays receiving, true. But, I mean, it wasn't like he ran for 250 with a 90-yard touchdown. It was a very methodical game for Nebraska, and I think it's a great sign for them building confidence, not just for the rest of 2025, but for 2026 as well.